Donald Trump has always lied. But lately, it feels like something more troubling is happening. As he gets older, Trump seems increasingly trapped in a fantasy world where every story has to revolve around him. Allies are begging for his attention. Enemies are secretly conspiring against him. Elections are only legitimate if he wins. Any failure has to be sabotage, and reality itself has to bend in order to protect his ego. And this week, Italian Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni became the latest person dragged into that fantasy. According to Reuters, Trump told an Italian TV channel that Meloni had begged him to take a photo with her at the G7 summit. He claimed she wanted the picture so badly, and that he only agreed because he felt sorry for her. Now think about that for a moment. This is the President of the United States talking about the leader of Italy, one of America's closest allies. And he tells a story that makes her sound needy, desperate, and subordinate. He makes himself the powerful figure granting the favor. He turns a diplomatic interaction into a bizarre dominance fantasy. But Meloni was not having it. She fired back almost immediately. She said Trump's story was completely made up. She said she was astonished by the comments, and then she delivered the perfect line. "Neither I nor Italy ever beg." That line is devastating, because Meloni is not some obvious Trump opponent. She is a right-wing leader. She had been viewed as one of Trump's more natural allies in Europe. She even attended his inauguration in 2025. So when Giorgia Meloni feels compelled to publicly call out Donald Trump for inventing a story, that tells you something. This was not just a diplomatic spat. It was a window into how Trump operates. Because the story he invented had all the usual Trump ingredients. He was the center of attention. A powerful woman supposedly needed his approval. An ally was reduced to a supplicant. The facts did not matter. And the point of the story was not policy, diplomacy, or strategy. The point was ego. That is what makes the Meloni incident so revealing. It is not really about one photo at the G7. It is about Trump's deeper need to turn every interaction into proof of his dominance. And this is not new. This pattern goes back years. Trump's modern political rise was built in large part on birtherism, the racist conspiracy theory that Barack Obama was not born in the United States. It was completely false. It was grotesque, and it was a preview of everything that came later. Because birtherism taught Trump a very important lesson. He could say something outrageous. He could dominate the media cycle. He could force serious people to respond to nonsense, and instead of being disqualified, he could become more powerful. That was the early model. Invent a false reality. Repeat it endlessly. Make the media cover it. Then claim victory because everyone is talking about you. And once Trump became president, the lying became a governing style. Crowd sizes, poll numbers, the economy. Foreign leaders supposedly praising him behind closed doors. Every controversy became the same story. Trump was always winning. Trump was always mistreated. Trump was always smarter than the experts. Trump was always the victim of shadowy enemies. At first, a lot of people treated this as just Trump being Trump. But that was a mistake, because over time, the lies were not just spin. They became the operating system. And then came 2020. Trump lost the election. And instead of accepting reality, he tried to replace it with a fantasy. The election was stolen. The machines were rigged. Dead people voted. Suitcases of ballots appeared. Foreign countries were involved. One fake claim after another. And the key point is this. The claims were rejected by courts. They were rejected by election officials. They were rejected by state officials. They were rejected by members of his own administration. But Trump kept going. This is where the pattern became truly dangerous. The same impulse that gave us birtherism became an assault on the peaceful transfer of power. And this is where the Lindsey Graham quote becomes so important. According to reporting on the Georgia investigation, Graham told the grand jury that if Trump had been told Martians came and stole the votes, Trump probably would have believed it. That is not just a funny line. That is an indictment from one of Trump's own allies, because it suggests that Trump was not evaluating evidence. He was not trying to find the truth. He was looking for any story, no matter how absurd, that let him avoid the fact that he lost. And by 2024, the pattern had gotten even worse. Trump's rallies and interviews were full of lies, tangents, bizarre claims, insults, and incoherent statements. But too often, major media outlets cleaned it up. They summarized the chaos into normal political language. They turned rambling claims into conventional campaign coverage. They treated outrageous statements as strategy, messaging, or performance. That is what critics have called sane washing, or, in Trump's case, Trump washing. It is when the press takes something radical, bizarre, or incoherent, and packages it in a way that makes it sound normal. And the problem is obvious. When the media translates Trump's rambling into something coherent, viewers do not see the actual problem. They do not see the disconnect from reality. They do not see the deterioration. They do not see how often the man is simply making things up. That is what made the Meloni incident so striking. The Italian Prime Minister did not play along. The international press did not play along. They did not treat it like normal political theater. They said plainly what happened. Trump claimed something. Meloni said he invented it. And the comments created a diplomatic backlash. Italy's foreign minister even canceled a planned trip to the United States. That kind of clarity matters. Because for years, too much of the American press was afraid to say the obvious. A lie is a lie. A delusion is not a strategy. And when the President of the United States invents humiliating stories about allied leaders, that is not just Trump being Trump. That is a problem for American credibility. And then, almost immediately after the Meloni incident, we got the reflecting pool fiasco. The Lincoln Memorial reflecting pool had been renovated, and then the project turned into a public embarrassment. The water turned green. The coating had problems. The whole thing looked like a metaphor waiting to happen. And Trump responded in the most Trump way possible. He blamed vandals. He claimed sabotage. He suggested people had damaged the pool, cut into it, and ruined the project. Without a shred of evidence, he turned the story into a drama about enemies, sabotage, and people trying to destroy something associated with him. And again, the pattern was familiar. Something went wrong. Trump could not simply admit that maybe the project was flawed, rushed, mismanaged, or complicated. Instead, reality had to be rewritten. There had to be enemies. There had to be a conspiracy. There had to be a story where Trump was not responsible, but was instead the victim of people trying to sabotage his greatness. And this is where the story becomes even more concerning. Trump's malignant narcissism has always been obvious. The need for praise, the inability to admit error, the constant victimhood, the obsession with dominance, the endless need to humiliate others in order to elevate himself. But now, that narcissism appears to be colliding with age. The stories seem more erratic. The claims seem more bizarre. The separation between fact and fantasy seems thinner. And the country is left with a disturbing question. What happens when a president's psychological need to be right becomes stronger than his ability to recognize reality? Because this is not just about Trump saying something weird. It matters because presidents operate in reality. Foreign policy requires reality. Economic policy requires reality. National security requires reality. Democracy requires reality. When a president invents stories about allies, denies election results, blames imaginary enemies, and demands that everyone else accept his fantasy, the damage is not contained to one news cycle. It erodes trust, it weakens alliances, it normalizes lying, and it forces everyone around him to choose between telling the truth and protecting the fantasy. That is why the Meloni incident matters. It was not just an embarrassing diplomatic moment. It was a warning. This is the same pattern that began with birtherism. It escalated through the 2020 election lie. It was sanitized during the 2024 campaign. And now it shows up almost daily in the second Trump term. Trump makes things up. Then he repeats them. Then he demands that the world pretend they are true. And now, as age appears to aggravate the narcissism that has always defined him, the fantasy world is becoming harder to ignore. That is not strength. That is not strategy. That is malignant narcissism hardening into delusion. And it is increasingly clear that Donald Trump either cannot or will not separate truth from fiction.